Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 16, entitled The Payovrata Process of Worship. Text number 6. As was discussed in previous chapters, Bali Maharaj rendered services to the descendants of Bhrigu, Brahmins, and received in reciprocation their heartfelt blessings. Those blessings gave him extraordinary power, by which Bali could lead his troops to conquer the Devas. How he conquered them is quite extraordinary. He didn't have to lift a single weapon. He simply marched to Indra's capital, surrounded it. When Indra saw Bali with such unparalleled enthusiasm, with effulgence and confidence, Indra realized that he is endowed with such potency, I cannot stand before him. Even with all the demigods and all of their weapons and powers, not possible. Indra asked Brihaspati, his guru, what could be done. Brihaspati said, they have achieved the blessings of great souls. Bali Maharaj has gotten that blessing, therefore there's nothing you can do. Better you hide. Let him take everything you have. And if someday Bali, or when that day comes, when he displeases the Brahmins, the great souls, and is cursed by them, then only will you have any hope of receiving your property back. So not a single arrow was put to the bow, and yet Indra and all of his people ran away. They not only ran, but by their mystic powers, they changed their forms so they couldn't be recognized. They were hiding. Who suffered the most? Their mother, Aditi. The nature of a mother's love. Like we read in Mahabharata, how the Pandavas suffered death threats, humiliation, exile. But who suffered most was Kunti Devi, their mother. Even though for most of that time she was living in the palace being protected by Bhishma and Vidura. Just thinking of her children sleeping in the forest, always being hunted by Duryodhana's people. A place where there's wild animals and rakshasas and so much inconvenience, and they had nothing at all. And thinking about Karna, who was her own son, who made enemies with her other sons, and neither sides knew that they were brothers, and she couldn't tell for various reasons. She suffered the most. Krishna would be playing, and Yashoda Mai would always be worrying. Her whole life was worrying, blissfully worrying. Will he be pricked by a thorn? Will he be scratched by the claws of a monkey? Will he be hit by the horn of a bull? Will he fall from a tree? She was always worrying in ecstatic love. So, in this particular story, Aditi, she was in many ways a self-satisfied person. She lived in the forest with Kashyapa Muni. Demigods lived in royal opulence, but Kashyapa was a sage, and she followed the line of her husband. She was in her ashram. Kashyapa Muni, his pleasure was meditation. He wasn't really all that bothered by whatever the demigods and he was the father of both the demigods and the asuras. Yes? But he was not really concerned with any of this. He was absorbed in meditation. He was detached from the things of the world. But Aditi, she was severely inflicted with moroseness, thinking of her children, homeless, hiding, penniless, stripped of all their prestige. When Kashyapa, after a long time, came out of his meditation, he comes home and he sees her in this state. And great sages, they don't only see the state, but they can see into a person's heart. So Kashyapa Muni was very much concerned. Why are you so unhappy? You are lamenting in such a state. And he's asking different questions of why this may have happened. Have you not performed your prescribed duties properly? Have you not done your sadhana today? And in this particular verse, he's especially asking a very critical question. Has any uninvited guests come to our ashram and you did not treat them properly? You did not serve them sufficiently? And because of that, in a sad state of mind, they went away? Because if a grihasta commits this offense, there's a very serious reaction. Kashyapa Muni understood this. And he understood how refined and cultured his wife was. And how much she would suffer if she did not properly welcome an uninvited guest. What to speak of an invited guest? And Srila Prabhupada in this purport explains the culture of the Grihastha ashram. Not only the Grihastha, the culture of civilized life. That we will explain the principle and then the psychology behind the principle. And then give some examples. And there are thousands of such examples in the scriptures that very nicely give us a picture of that principle, exemplify it. The principle is that greed is a great enemy. The feeling of possessiveness, not only does it very much disturb our spiritual progress, but it's the cause of conflict, it's the cause of war, it's the cause of hatred. Krishna tells in Gita, Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, that I am the proprietor of everything that exists. And the Bhagavatam explains the basic core seed of all material suffering is Janmasya Yota Aham Mameti. This misconception that I am this body and those things that are in relation to the body are mine. This is the basis of ignorance, this I and mine. So to make spiritual progress, we must understand that nothing is mine. This body is not me and it is not mine. Everything is the property of God. And if we actually believe that, then we will utilize everything according to Krishna's desire. Krishna says in Gita, Aham bija pradapita, that I am the seed-giving father and mother of every living being. Therefore, we understand whatever God has entrusted to us is meant to serve others. Not only my family, of course, charity begins at home, but it has to extend beyond the home too. Charity begins at home doesn't mean your family at home only. It means any guest that comes to your home. It's a sacred duty. In the Vaishnava culture, people are very eager to invite guests to come to their home, especially guests who will enlighten them in spiritual knowledge and inspiration. But this is emphasized again and again in the Holy Scriptures. Why? This idea of the atiti, the uninvited guest. Practically anywhere in the Vedas where it discusses the Grihastha ashram, this is always included as one of the duties, with emphasis, is to welcome, give hospitality, and satisfy uninvited guests who come to your home. Now the concept is, Krishna tells in the Gita, Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridesha arjuna tishtati, that he is seated in the heart of every living being, and everything is his property. So therefore, when a guest comes to their home, we see the guest is not God, but the guest, God is within the heart of the guest. The presence, a part of every living being is a part of God. Vidyavanaya sampane brahmani gavihastini. We should see. And a Grihastha considers that Krishna is coming through this guest to receive my services, even if they are an enemy. Prabhupada explains here that when one's worst enemy comes to your house, you should treat them with such affection, welcome them with such genuine enthusiasm, that they, at least momentarily, they forget that you're an enemy. They actually enjoy your hospitality. And in this case, Srila Prabhupada would often use the example of Duryodhana and the Pandavas. In Kurukshetra, on the 7th day of the war, the Pandavas did serious damage to the Kuru army, especially Bhima and Arjuna. They were devastating the various formations that the Kurus had created, annihilating mass numbers of their soldiers. At the beginning of the war, the Kurus had the upper hand. But just about that time, the Pandavas were really becoming enthusiastic with their armies. And Duryodhana had a confrontation with Bhima, and he was beaten down, and he was bloody and covered with wounds. He was in really bad condition. So he went to the tent of Karna, Radheya. Now Karna, he wanted to fight in that war, but he wasn't allowed to, in one sense, because Bhishma was so critical of him. The reason Bhishma was so critical of him is because Bhishma knew that Karna was the brother of the Pandavas. And he didn't want them to, he didn't want to see Kunti suffer, their children killing each other. So he was always insulting Karna, and Karna said, "I'm not, as long as he's the commander-in-chief, I am not going to fight." So Bhishma was very happy with that. But Duryodhana was not happy, because Karna, after Bhishma, he was the best fighter. Bhishma, Drona, and Karna. So Duryodhana went to his friend Karna's tent. It was all bloody and beaten by Bhima. And he was saying, "We need you to fight in this war." Karna said, "Just give me the chance." Because Bhishma has this false compassion to the Pandavas, he's not willing to kill them. But I will kill them. Just give me a chance. Get Bhishma to retire from the battle, and I will kill them all in one day. You have my word. So Duryodhana went back to the tent of Bhishma. And Bhishma, in the battlefield, the tent is your house, is your home. So he got the royal physicians and had them putting medications on Duryodhana's wounds. And Bhishma himself got special herbs that he had from the Himalayas, because he was really a Mahajan in a sense that he knew all the different arts and sciences. And he relieved Duryodhana of all of his pain. Then Duryodhana very respectfully began, but then gradually was becoming more arrogant. He said, "I know you're fighting very nicely and everything, but the fact is you have the power to kill the Pandavas. There's only 5 of them. You can destroy the whole army. Why aren't you trying? Is it because of compassion for them, or is it because of hatred for me that you refuse to kill them? If that's the case, then please retire from the battlefield and let me bring Karna in to kill them." Well, Bhishma was extremely insulted by this. His Kshatriya nature was very much aroused. He warned Duryodhana again and again and again that as long as Krishna is fighting with the Pandavas, there's nothing you can do. But Duryodhana was very, very expert. He was really a master at manipulating human nature. So he got Bhishma's Kshatriya tendencies very much inflamed. And he promised he promised Duryodhana. He said, I will create 5 arrows, and tomorrow these arrows will kill the 5 Pandavas. The only chance they have is if Krishna protects them. If Krishna wants to protect them, there's nothing I can do. But Krishna has promised he would not lift any weapon or fight in this battlefield. So as long as he keeps his promise, tomorrow the Pandavas will die. Then Bhishma took from his quiver 5 arrows with golden shafts covered with jewels and the feathers of buzzards. He put down a cloth, nice silk cloth, put the arrows on the cloth in the ground, and Bhishma sat right there on the ground with those arrows, and for a long time he meditated and chanted mantras. By his powers, he invoked within those arrows the power to kill the Pandavas. Duryodhana was in jubilation. He saw Bhishma sitting there, chanting mantras, praying, meditating, invoking these powers in those arrows. When Bhishma came out of his trance, he said, there is nothing that can save the Pandavas unless Krishna breaks his promise. These arrows will kill them tomorrow. Duryodhana was really attached to those 5 arrows. He told Bhishma, let me keep these arrows and I'll give them to you in the morning. Bhishma let him keep it. Meanwhile, Maharaj Yudhisthira back on the Pandava side, he was very, very happy because for the first time, they were really beginning to win the war. But Arjuna was very sad. He was weeping because one of his sons was killed that day before, Iravan. Krishna approached Arjuna and he told Arjuna, because Krishna knows everything, Vedaham samatitani varatamanani chajana bhavishyani cha bhutani mam tu vedana kashtana. Krishna knows everything that's happened in the past, all things that are happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. And he knows all living entities. He's the Paramatma, listening in every heart. The inconceivable potencies of the Lord. Krishna's there in Kurukshetra, but as the Paramatma, he there in Kurukshetra has the potency to hear every thought and every word and see every action of every living entity in all material and spiritual worlds. And he's not distracted. He has his energies, but still, he's the inconceivable controller of all the energies. He's all-knowing. Krishna tells Arjuna that tomorrow you and your brothers will die unless you do what I say. There are 5 arrows that Bhishma has consecrated to kill you. tomorrow. They're in the tent of Duryodhana. Now, do you remember long ago when the Gandharvas defeated Duryodhana and captured him? And at that time, the message came to the Pandavas. The Gandharvas, by their incredible fighting skills, they drove Karna and all the other associates of Duryodhana away, and then they captured him. And they humiliated him. And the only way they could be saved was the Pandavas. So the message came to Yudhishthira Maharaj. And Bhima said, good for Duryodhana. After all, he had already insulted Draupadi. He had already tried to kill Bhima with poisoned cakes. He tried to burn them and their mother alive in that house of lac. They cheated them in that game and exiled them to the forest. And Duryodhana on that day was coming to humiliate them. Bhima said, let the Gandharvas do what they want with Duryodhana. Yudhishthira Maharaj, he said, we are 105. There is 100 Kurus and 5 Pandavas. Now we are divided, but when someone from outside comes to attack, we are 105. We are one. We must help him. So Arjuna went in there, and when Arjuna came in fighting, the Gandharvas all offered obeisances and gave him Duryodhana back. And Duryodhana actually, he did something that he regretted later. He made a vow to Arjuna, because you saved my life today, because you saved my integrity. He said, I will give you. You ask for something and I will give it to you. I have to return your favor. Arjuna laughed. He said, you vow? Maybe sometime later. Arjuna forgot about it, but Krishna reminded him. Duryodhana promised he would do you a favor at that time. He has to do that for you. Go to his tent and ask him for those 5 arrows. Now, the way it wasn't like today, all this terrorism and crazy guerrilla warfare. Things, even enemies did things with honor. They would fight in the day, and as soon as the sun set, then there was no fighting. People can go to the other side without any problem. So Arjuna, with no armor, with not a single weapon, empty-handed, got on his white horse and went to the Kuru side. The Kurus saw Arjuna without weapons, driving through. Nobody tried to hurt him. He went right to Duryodhana's tent. Duryodhana had all sorts of the best, most heroic, powerful guards. They saw Arjuna coming, and they welcomed him and brought him right into Duryodhana's tent. And Duryodhana was just about to go to sleep, and right under his bed he had the 5 arrows. And he was really going to have a good night's sleep, because he was thoroughly convinced that Krishna would not break his promise, and he was thoroughly convinced that Bhishma would 100% kill the Pandavas the next day. And the war would be over. So it was going to be a good sleep Duryodhana was so eager for the next day to come when he would be victorious. Then Arjuna comes in the tent just when he's sleeping, just about to be asleep. And Duryodhana understood that Arjuna was an atiti. He was an uninvited guest. And according to culture, you have to welcome them and make them feel very much loved. Even if and Arjuna was his second worst enemy after Bhima. Duryodhana welcomed him, gave him a seat, gave him water, and then he asked Arjuna, "You have come? If there's anything you would like me to give you, I will give you. If you want me to end the war right now and give you the entire kingdom back, I will do it." He said that. But he knew Arjuna wouldn't do that. Because as he was a Kshatriya, he knew that Arjuna was a Kshatriya. And when you're in the midst of the war, you're not going to take favors like that. For Arjuna at this point, his integrity was based on winning the war, not cowardly asking for the kingdom back, because one's an uninvited guest. So he offered him the entire kingdom that night, because that's the etiquette. But he knew Arjuna wouldn't take it. But then Arjuna asked, "I don't want the kingdom. I only want those 5 arrows." Duryodhana was shocked. It was just, things were just happening too fast. He asked, "How do you know about these 5 arrows?" Because in the entire universal creation, the only 2 people that knew about that was Bhishma and Duryodhana. Nobody told anybody. And Krishna. He said, "How did you know about these 5 arrows?" And Arjuna said, "Krishna told me." And Duryodhana understood, Krishna. Krishna again. And it was all happening so fast that Duryodhana, he really had to maintain the integrity, because if you don't maintain the integrity of welcoming and properly serving an uninvited guest, you're going to lose everything. That in itself could have been such a karmic offense that he would lose the whole war. Please understand, people took things seriously in those days. It was a very serious thing. He had to do it. We see in this verse today, Aditi was so morose. She was lamenting like Kashyapa Muni practically had never seen her before. And Kashyapa Muni was wondering, did Aditi not welcome an Atiti? This could ruin a person's life. Also, when Arjuna came back from Dwarka after Krishna left this world and Yudhisthira saw him in such a lamentable situation, he asked, "Did someone come to you and ask for charity and you didn't give it to them? Is that why you're in this state?" It's a very serious thing. So Duryodhana, he would have been cursed even worse if he didn't give it. And also Arjuna reminded him. Arjuna said, you remember you vowed after I saved you from the Gandharva? You remember? You vowed to grant one request. This is my request. Give me those arrows. And when he found out that Krishna told him, he became very disoriented. He picked up the arrows and handed them to Arjuna. And Arjuna brought them back and showed them to Krishna. Krishna was very happy. And the next day, Bhishma, he asked Duryodhana, where are the arrows? Duryodhana told the story, and Bhishma wanted to glorify Krishna. He said, tomorrow, either Krishna has to break his promise, or he's going to make me break my promise. Because I'm promising to kill Arjuna if he doesn't break his promise and fight. So that beautiful story from the Bhagavatam is based on that episode. Srila Prabhupada would often cite that incident, especially to teach us how important hospitality is. It's not just a detail. Hospitality is one of the prominent duties, especially of a grihasta. Or for a brahmachari, if you're living in an ashram, you have the same basic responsibility of hospitality. Now, an invited guest, that's quite obvious. If you offend an invited guest, that's very serious. But an uninvited guest, one who just comes at the least expected time, this is a duty. And one of the greatest examples of this principle was Rantidev. Rantidev was a king, but he was so selfless, always eager to serve others. He claimed no proprietor, he claimed nothing to be his own. He saw everything as the property of Krishna, and he saw Krishna in the heart of every living being. So he wanted to share whatever he had with everyone, with anyone. One day he and his family, they went to a forest, and for the welfare of the whole kingdom and for the pleasure of Krishna, they fasted for 48 days. And at the end of the fast, somebody brought them some food with milk, with ghee, with some water. And they were just at the verge of death when this food came. They were trembling of hunger. They sat down to eat. At that time, a Brahmin appeared at their door. Atiti. He was an uninvited guest. Rantidev sat him down, fed him to his full satisfaction, and the Brahmin left. Then Rantidev with his family again sat down to take prasad, and a Shudra appeared. Now the Brahmin didn't even ask for anything, nor did the Shudra. They just happened to come. And Rantidev immediately offered all respects, love and kindness, obeisances, because he's a guest. He's seeing Krishna in their hearts. And fed the Shudra to his full satisfaction. And at the same time, he fed his whole family. So the family was fine. And the Shudra was happy, and he left. There was only a little prasad left. Family was happy, but Rantidev had not had anything yet. So he just sat down to take prasad when this man came with a pack of dogs. And the man cried out, "I am very hungry and all my dogs are starving. Please give us some food." So Rantidev welcomed them, offered obeisances to all of them with great respect. He fed to the full satisfaction all the dogs, as well as the keeper of the dogs. And dogs can be quite hungry. So they ate everything else. There was not a morsel left. Then he offered obeisances to them, and all the dogs left. All Ranti had was enough water for one person left. At that time, all of his limbs were trembling of hunger, and he was on the verge of death. That water would just keep him alive. Without that water, there was no hope for him. He was just about to drink that water. Now just think about it. 48 days without a drop of water. If you've ever done Nirjala Ekadasi for one day, you know how thirsty you are. Now, if an uninvited guest came to you at that point, you could imagine what a challenge that would be. So just he was about to drink the water, a Chandala comes. And the Chandala really looks like he's suffering. He says, "Oh, sir, I am dying of thirst. If you have any water, please give me this water." And Rantidev looked at that Chandala with such compassion. And then he spoke. And Shukadev Goswami tells that his words were like nectar, amrita. And Srila Prabhupada writes that Rantidev, he loved people so dearly. He cared about people so much that when he spoke, it was so much from the heart with compassion that his words were nectar. His words could satisfy anybody. And he spoke a prayer to God. He said, "I do not pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for the 8 perfections of mystic yoga. I do not pray for liberation from the suffering of repeated birth and death. I only pray for one thing. Let me remain in this world with all living beings so that I can suffer all kinds of difficulties on their behalf so that they will be free of all suffering. By giving this water to this Chandala, I will never again be subject to thirst, hunger, lamentation, agitation, moroseness, or illusion." And then with a loving, grateful heart, offering obeisances to that Chandala, he gave him the water. Which means he gave him his life. And then, just when he was about to die, happily, the Brahman, the Shudra, the dogs, and the Chandala, they all returned and turned into Brahma and Shiva and other devas. And they gave him nice prasad, it appears. They were offering obeisances to him practically because they wanted to see what kind of a compassion he had. What was his integrity to serve an uninvited guest? Even at the cost of death and suffering, he was willing to do so. Interestingly, and Srila Prabhupada emphasizes this, when Brahma and Shiva and Devas appeared, they offered him any benediction, and he knew they were going to offer. What he did is he fixed his mind exclusively on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is before they gave him any food. He fixed his mind on the Supreme Lord. He didn't want to be diverted from the path. He knew they were going to offer him benedictions, and he didn't want any material benedictions. He already expressed to his Lord his prayer. He didn't want mystic cities. He didn't want liberation. He didn't want anything of this world. He only wanted to suffer difficulties on behalf of others so that they would be free of suffering.